And now to our top headlines. Jordan's King Abdullah told Israel that he will not renew the 25-year lease contained in the annexes of the 1994 peace treaty, which his father, King Hussein, signed with former Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. These annexes granted Israel the ownership rights under Jordanian sovereignty in 2 pockets of southern Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded at a memorial ceremony for Yitzhak Rabin.
נכנס השלום בין ישראל לירדן לשנתו ה-25. בהסכם השלום, ירדן שמרה לעצמה את האופציה לקבל לידיה את השטח בנהריים ליד הירדן ואת מובלע צופר בערבה. נמסר לנו היום שהיא מבקשת לממש את האופציה הזאת בשנה ה-25. אנחנו ניכנס איתה למשא ומתן על האפשרות של הערכה של ההסדר הקיים. אבל אין ספק, בראייה כוללת, שההסכם כולו הוא נכס חשוב ויקר לשתי המדינות.
The announcement came 2 days after an anti-Israel demonstration in Amman. Depka sources reveal that the Jordanian monarch's strategy is to bring his kingdom into alignment with Turkey, Syria, and Qatar. Turkish Prime Minister Omar al-Razaz has been speaking with Turkish ministers to persuade Ankara to stop exporting goods to the Gulf through the Haifa port, and rather to send them through Syria and Jordan. Earlier this month, Jordan reopened its border crossing with Syria, and the king is currently strengthening ties with Syria's Bashar Assad. While Qatar is funding Israeli fuel to the Gaza Strip to aid in tensions, the emirate is also trying to wean Jordan's King Abdullah from his ties with Saudi Arabia and over to Qatar's side of the feud. By going back on the peace treaty with Israel, King Abdullah will gain stronger ties to countries that are hostile to Israel while attempting to alleviate unrest at home over the current failing economy. The Saudi admission on Saturday that the journalist Jamal Khashoggi died after a fight in the consulate with intelligence agents has left a trail of unrest. 18 Saudis have been arrested in the ongoing investigation, and there are many unanswered questions about the murder, including the fact that no one knows what happened to the body of the dead journalist. The Saudis report that it was given to an unnamed local collaborator who appears to have vanished with the body. World leaders remain skeptical about the findings, including President Trump, who announced that Congress would be involved in the U.S. response.
No, I'm not satisfied until we find the answer, but it was a big first step. It was a good first step, but I want to get to the answer.
Trump continued that abandoning the arms deal with Saudi Arabia, quote, would harm us more than them. King Salman appointed a ministerial committee to restructure the country's General Intelligence Agency and to issue its findings within a month. This step may have been intended as a necessary vote of confidence in Prince Mohammed bin Salman. However, by royal decree, he also got rid of a close associate of the Crown Prince, Deputy Intelligence Chief Ahmed al-Asiri, along with court advisor Saud al-Qahtani and 3 intelligence officers. The Crown Prince's rivals at home, high-ranking princes, army commanders, and intelligence agents have been fighting bin Salman for months. They saw the Khashoggi affair as their chance to bring him down and will be encouraged to increase their efforts as a result of the king getting rid of the Crown Prince's friends in the intelligence service. King Salman has left his opinions open, and his next step will depend on whether the Crown Prince can get back into his role of the kingdom's leader or is beaten by his rivals. One rival who could be in line to replace him is his younger brother, Khalid bin Salman. Khalid was the Saudi ambassador to the U.S. until 2 weeks ago. He returned home and is not expected to go back to his post. As for the fallout in Washington, Trump will be glad to use the Saudi admission and his promise to work with Congress as a means of getting rid of the Khashoggi case before the midterm elections. In the course of his affair, the political foes at home have tried to benefit from his championship of the Saudi kingdom as a major ally and the biggest buyer of U.S. arms, and win him over through the friendship between his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and the Saudi Crown Prince. During the Khashoggi probe, the Trump administration wavered between threatening severe punishment and sanctions on Saudi Arabia and trying to take the heat off Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The White House ultimately decided that they may have to abandon Salman while making every effort to preserve the alliance between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. Trump sent U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to Saudi Arabia and Turkey to sort out the facts from fiction, especially as he is the former CIA director and has knowledge of the royal family's inner workings. However, Pompeo denied seeing or hearing any of the recordings and tapes that Turkey claimed as evidence. Prime Minister Netanyahu, who's a close ally of Trump, could also be affected by the accusations against Saudi Arabia and its crown prince. His Middle East strategy has been tied to the Saudi kingdom and his strong rapport with Mohammed bin Salman. Western intelligence sources report that Iran delivered GPS components to Lebanon. Iran's 747 departed from the Tehran International Airport on Tuesday, touched down in Damascus, then continued to Beirut. The GPS devices were sent to manufacture precision-guided weapons in Iranian factories in Lebanon, but the Iranian plane was not intercepted. Depka reports that the Israel Air Force has refrained from flying missions over Syria since the deployment of advanced Russian S-300 air defense systems. On September 17th, the last Israeli airstrike was conducted against Iranian targets in Syria, which resulted in the accidental downing of the Russian Il-20 plane by Syrian missiles. Putin is holding back on setting up a meeting with Netanyahu, who has reiterated the importance of Israeli bombardments of Iranian targets in Syria to Russian Deputy Prime Minister Maxim Akimov. However, Israeli warplanes remained on the ground. Meanwhile, the Russian army deployed 3 battalion sets of S-300 air defense systems in Syria, supported by advanced electronic warfare systems. Depka file military sources state that although Israel's capabilities are advanced, Russia's operational electronic warfare capabilities are an unknown factor in the West. There is still no word from Israel about when operations over Syria will continue. An Israeli spokesman said that the Palestinian riot on the Gaza border was the quietest in 7 months. Nevertheless, he went on to say that there were cases of explosives, grenades, attempted border crossings, and various acts of terror. Israeli officials tried to play down the violence that occurred, such as when 3 gangs pushed across the border before getting hit with tear gas and live fire following the 2 rockets aimed at Israeli soil. Yet the Israeli Security Cabinet prevented the IDF from striking back in order to give Hamas yet another chance to demonstrate restraint. Instead, over 10,000 Palestinians showed up on the border fence and hurled a total of 33 explosive devices at Israeli troops.
סיימתי עכשיו הערכת מצב עם ראשי צה"ל וצמרת הביטחון. ישראל רואה בחומרה רבה את ההתקפות עליה בגדר, על עוטף עזה, על באר שבע, בכל מקום. ואני אמרתי בפתח ישיבת הממשלה השבוע, שאם ההתקפות הללו לא ייפסקו, אנחנו נפסיק אותם. ואני רוצה לומר לכם היום, ישראל תפעל בעוצמה רבה.
Last Wednesday, the advanced Tornado G-Grad missile that smashed into a Beersheba home was a new and improved type of deadly weapon, which carries boosted warheads containing 70 to 80 kilos of explosives to a distance of 40 to 60 kilometers. Depka file reports that the 2 missiles had sophisticated automatic positioning navigation, a capability which Hamas and Jihad have not been able to replicate without help. Depka file reports that most likely the missiles were smuggled into the Gaza Strip through Sinai and supplied by Iran and terrorist groups in eastern Libya. This simultaneous launch of 2 advanced missiles in opposite directions required advanced training and coordination between 2 missile teams. Following the event, a senior IDF officer explained that the Iron Dome system, which is supposed to detect and stop these rockets, is not 100% airtight. He failed to explain why all the city's alert sirens in Tel Aviv were silent. Since the attack, Iron Dome batteries have been stationed at key points in central Israel. Depka sources have discussed Netanyahu's doctrine of containment. Its main purpose is to avoid war except as a last resort when Israel's survival or territorial integrity is threatened. Instead, the goal is to allow Israel to develop strong ties and strategic partnerships with Arab neighbors backed by the U.S. However, this containment strategy also had its shortcomings. First, Israel missed curtailing Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. Second, the government did not impede Iran's expansionist steps in Israel's backyard or in the Red Sea. No limits were placed in Hezbollah's military expansion in Lebanon and Syria. The IDF failed to root out Iran's military grip on Syria, and over the past 8 months, Israel failed to impede the violence waged by Hamas on the Gaza border fence against troops guarding the border and the 500,000 people living in southern Israel. Palestinian terrorist violence continued to escalate as they faced no restraints. Hamas, Iran, Hezbollah, and Syria are taking into consideration Israel's military passivity in order to gain ground on Israel's borders. With us to discuss this is Dr. Martin Sherman, director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me back.
So it appears that Hamas is not showing any restraint, but rather accelerating its actions against Israel. Does Israel have an effective offensive, or will we continue to be on the defensive throughout this terror?
Well, I think I've said before that the problem in Gaza is not operational, it's conceptual. Or rather, it's operational because it's conceptual. It depends on how you perceive the concept, the conflict. You can either perceive the Palestinians as a prospective peace partner or as an implacable enemy. If you take the former perception, I don't believe that there's anything that Israel can do to contain the violence or prevent it. Because the source of the violence of the Arab enmity is not anything that the Israeli or that the Jewish state does. It's what the Jewish state is. It's Jewish. And therefore, I think, you know, if you look at what's happened, every time the Palestinians have developed some kind of offensive tactic, Israel's developed a counter tactic, and the Palestinians have developed something to overcome that. You know, there were terrorist attacks, so we put up a fence. So they developed missiles, so we developed the Iron Dome. We had the Iron Dome, they started burrowing tunnels. We put down $1 billion barrier, so they had balloons and kites, and I'm only waiting for a drone attack with probably some non-conventional load on it that will explode over an Israeli community. So I think, you know, I have many disagreements with the Defense Minister Lieberman, but I think he is right in saying that Israel needs a very decisive military strike on Gaza, although we probably disagree on the scope that's needed.
What scope do you think is needed?
Well, put it this way, the only way that Israel can determine who rules Gaza is to rule it by itself. The idea that you can somehow come to agreement with Hamas, to put it flippantly, reminds me of someone who's trying to turn a man-eating tiger into a bunny rabbit by offering him a diet of premium carrots. You know, what are you going to do to change the DNA of a judecidal terrorist organization to make it some sort of Judeo-philic entity? I think it's a futile attempt, and Israel must take over Gaza and deal with the problem of ruling over a foreign people by initiating a large-scale project of incentivized immigration, which, by the way, the Gazans seem to want themselves, because if you Google Gaza immigration fleeing, you'll find many articles which discuss the wish of the Gazans to find alternative place of residence. And recently in Haaretz, which can't be accused of being a radical right-wing publication, talked about Turkey becoming the promised land of the Palestinians, and the entire Gazan elites trying to find their way to Turkey.
Let's now bring Egypt into the picture. So Hamas has rejected the Egyptian demand to stop the Gaza protests. What do you think their next step is?
Well, as again, I'm not sure, but I'm skeptical that, you know, it doesn't really matter what step they take. I don't think that they can pull a rabbit out of the hat and somehow convert the Hamas into a prospective peace partner of any credibility.
Do you think that the current government is preserving Hamas rule in Gaza?
Well, it may be, you know, they may have adopted the stance, the better the devil you know than the devil you don't. But I think that's rather short-sighted, because, you know, they say they want Hamas to demilitarize. Well, really, you know, Hamas wouldn't be the Hamas if it agreed to demilitarize. If you weaken Hamas, then how is it going to withstand more radical elements? And you must remember that Gaza is a budding Sinai. You said previously that arms were being smuggled in. And, you know, there's some rather ferocious jihadi elements in Sinai. So if Hamas is weakened, you might get something completely unintended.
Do you think that opening the Gaza crossing will ease tensions, or will it make it worse?
I think it's a tremendous blunder. I think the best it can do is bring about a temporary respite, which Hamas will exploit to enhance its capabilities in the future for the next encounter.
Well, thank you very much for your insight today. That's Dr. Martin Sherman.
Thank you very much for having me back.
Turkish President Erdogan has maneuvered himself into an advantageous strategic position by using the disappearance of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi and setting free the American pastor Andrew Brunson. Turkey held him for 2 years on charges of abetting the 2016 failed coup attempt against him, spying for the Kurdistan Workers' Party, and associating with opposition leader Fethullah Gulen, who lives in exile in the U.S. Erdogan built the case against Saudi Arabia by sending out incriminating leaks. He was not dissuaded from this campaign when Pompeo visited Riyadh and Ankara.
This has very undoubtedly changed the course of the world. The oppressive regimes of the Middle East will no longer easily interfere with their citizens and journalists. No more journalists will be lost quietly in Europe and Asia. Intellectuals and their families will not be taken as hostage. As Turkish Arab Media Association, we will not put down the flag we waved from the first day to stop these attacks against journalists in the world. The attacks on journalists' lives will end, and Jamal's disintegrating body will be instrumental in re-establishing free thought and journalism in our region.
Başsavcılık açıklama yapmadan ayrıntılarla ilgili bir şey söyleyemem. Başsavcılık bu soruşturmayı yürütüyor. Fakat bu pazarlık türü yakıştırmalar son derece gayri ahlaki yakıştırmalardır. Yani son derece hunharca planlanmış, örtbas edilmek için çok gayret sarf edilmiş bir durumla karşı karşıya olduğumuzu görüyoruz. Şimdi bu çerçevede baktığımızda bu çok komplike bir cinayet. Burada gerçek neyse onun açığa çıkması bizim namus borcumuzdur. Ve burada gerçek açığa çıkacaktır. Bizzat Sayın Cumhurbaşkanımız olayın takipçisi olduğunu söylemiştir. Dünyada da zaten hiç kimse Türkiye'yi bu konuda suçlamıyor. Tam tersine Türkiye'nin bu konuda takdir edildiği bir tabloyla karşı karşıyayız.
During his visit, Turkish officials claim that the Saudi-Turkish team, which inspected the Saudi consulate last Monday, had encountered toxic chemicals used to clean up the scene of the Khashoggi murder. Depka sources report that the Turkish spy agency may have worked with a foreign agency for assistance in orchestrating the campaign against Riyadh and the Saudi crown prince, while pretending to conduct an honest investigation. Turkish Minister of Foreign Affairs had this to say.
Ve şimdi bunların tabii laboratuvarlarda dahil inceleme sonuçlarını bekliyorlar. Biz ortaya çıkacak sonuçları şeffaf bir şekilde tüm dünyayla paylaşacağız. Suudi Arabistan Başkonsolosluğu'na girdikten sonra kaybolmuştur ve Kaşıkçı'nın akıbeti ne olmuştur, nasıl olmuştur ve sorumlusu kimdir? Elbette bu konuda elimizde bazı şu ana kadar yapılan araştırmalar, soruşturmalar neticesinde bilgiler, deliller vardır.
President Erdogan's strong position on the playing field will allow several of his goals to be reached, including stabilizing the Turkish lira with U.S. and Saudi financial assistance. Washington could lift the sanctions imposed on Ankara over the imprisonment of Pastor Brunson, while Riyadh could pay to remove the Khashoggi affair from the international headlines. Turkey could win acceptance as an ally of Muslim nations, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Erdogan's status will be lifted in the Muslim world, which could pave the way for his appointment as mediator in the Saudi-UAE feud with Qatar. This will allow Erdogan to have more say in determining Syria's post-war future and greater clout in dealing with Moscow and Tehran. Meanwhile, Washington has taken advantage of the commotion spent on the Khashoggi affair to move in on Syria. Last Monday, the Special Representative for Syria Engagement, Ambassador James Jeffrey, was traveling to Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. His plan was to meet representatives of the Syrian people and reiterate the U.S. support for UN Security Council Resolution 2254, as well as UN Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura's efforts to set up the Syrian Constitutional Committee.